Ladies and gentlemen, when God gets ready to transform your life, don't expect the process to be smooth, neat, or predictable. Transformation isn't about comfort, it's about refinement. And refinement means fire. When God gets ready to transform you, one of the first things he may do is separate you from certain people, environments, and even ways of thinking that have become familiar to you. It's a process that can feel lonely, disorienting, and sometimes downright painful. But hear this truth: separation is not rejection, it's preparation. God knows that there are places he wants to take you, levels he wants to elevate you to, and purposes he wants you to fulfill. But not everyone can go with you, and not every environment is suited for the version of you that God is shaping. You see, growth often requires distance. Think of a seed planted in the ground. For a time it's isolated, buried in darkness. It can't stay on the surface where things are exposed to foot traffic and danger. It needs to be covered so that it can grow roots deep into the soil. Likewise, when God separates you, he's not to punish or abandon you. He's placing you in a position where you can develop spiritual depth, clarity, and strength without the distractions of the crowd. But let's be honest, being separated doesn't feel good. When friendships start to drift, when relationships fall apart, or when you find yourself outgrowing spaces and conversations that once felt comfortable, it can leave you questioning your worth or wondering what you did wrong. But that's when you have to remember that God sees the bigger picture. Some people in your life are seasonal, and their assignment in your story has already been fulfilled. If they stay past their season, they can hold you back from stepping into your next chapter. There are also times when God separates you, not because the people around you are wrong, but because their presence keeps you from relying fully on him. Sometimes we lean too heavily on human relationships, seeking validation, advice, or comfort that should come from God. When those relationships are removed or strained, it forces us to strengthen our connection with the one who never leaves us. You might wonder why God doesn't just elevate you with your whole circle intact. Why can't everyone come along for the journey? The truth is, not everyone is equipped to handle where God is taking you. Some people would diminish your confidence, dilute your vision, or distract you from your purpose. Elevation requires focus, and God knows that certain voices can become noise that drowns out his direction. Think about Abraham in the Bible. God called him to leave his homeland and his extended family, promising to make him the father of many nations. But Abraham couldn't step into the fullness of that promise while staying in the place of his upbringing. He had to separate himself from the familiar to walk into his destiny. That separation was necessary for his transformation and elevation. So what do you do when God is separating you? First, stop fighting to hold on to what God is trying to release. Let go of the relationships, environments, and mindsets that no longer serve your growth. Trust that if someone is meant to be part of your life, God will bring them back in his timing in a way that aligns with his purpose for you. Second, lean into the solitude as a season of preparation. Use the time to develop your relationship with God, to strengthen your character, and to gain clarity about your purpose. There's wisdom and revelation that God will give you in the quiet spaces that you can't hear when you're surrounded by the noise of the crowd. Don't misinterpret separation as rejection. God's plans for you are good, but sometimes the path to those plans requires stepping away from what's familiar. Trust that the separation is setting you up for something greater. God isn't just taking things away, he's making room for new blessings, new connections, and new opportunities that are aligned with the version of you he is creating. So if you find yourself in a season where it feels like things are being stripped away, don't panic. God is still in control. He's positioning you for elevation. And when the time is right, the same people who doubted you, the same environments that tried to confine you, will see the fruit of your transformation. Stay faithful, stay obedient, and trust the process. God never separates without a divine purpose in mind. Before God elevates you, he often allows a breaking to take place. This part of the journey can be difficult to accept because it challenges the very core of who you are. We all want growth, but we rarely talk about the breaking that must come before the building. It's in the breaking that God removes what no longer belongs. Attitudes, habits, relationships, and even thought patterns that hinder his work in your life. The breaking is not meant to destroy you, it's meant to prepare you for something greater. Think about a potter working with clay. Before the clay becomes a beautiful functional vessel, it first has to be molded, shaped, and sometimes pressed so hard that it looks unrecognizable. The potter applies pressure to form the clay into something useful. God does the same with us. When he starts to break down the things in your life that you thought you needed, it may feel uncomfortable, even painful, but don't mistake the pressure for punishment. It's purpose at work. Sometimes the breaking happens through external circumstances, a job loss, a failed relationship, or a major life setback. Other times it's internal, a breaking of pride, insecurity, or unhealthy desires. Whatever form it takes, the breaking has a purpose. God is stripping away what is keeping you from stepping into your true calling. He's refining your character, sharpening your focus, and strengthening your spirit. One of the hardest parts of the breaking process is that it often doesn't make sense while you're in it. You may find yourself asking, why is this happening to me? Or why would a loving God allow this kind of pain? But here's what you need to understand. God sees the end from the beginning. He knows what you're capable of, even when you don't. He knows that if you're going to handle the weight of the elevation he has planned for you, you need to be strong enough to carry it. And strength is built through struggle. Think about Joseph in the Bible. Before he became the second most powerful man in Egypt, he was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. That was his breaking season. But it was during that time that God was molding him, teaching him wisdom, patience, and leadership. By the time Joseph was elevated, he had the character to handle the responsibility. The breaking prepared him for the building. In your own life, the breaking might feel like everything is falling apart, but sometimes things have to fall apart so they can be rebuilt stronger and better than before. God is not in the business of patching up old things. He's in the business of creating new things. And new creation often requires tearing down what was before. One of the keys to surviving the breaking season is surrender. Stop fighting against what God is trying to do. The more you resist, the longer the process may take. Trust that God knows what he's doing, even if you don't understand it. Surrendering doesn't mean giving up. It means letting go of your need to control every outcome and allowing God to do his work. Another key is to stay rooted in faith. When you're in the middle of the breaking, your feelings will try to convince you that God has forgotten you or that he doesn't care. But faith says, even though I can't see it, I trust that God is working all things together for my good. Hold on to that truth, even when your circumstances say otherwise. Remember that the breaking is temporary. God doesn't break you just to leave you in pieces. He breaks you so that he can rebuild you into something stronger, wiser, and more aligned with his purpose. And when the building starts, you'll look back and realize that the breaking was one of the best things that ever happened to you because it prepared you for a level you never could have reached otherwise. So if you find yourself in a breaking season, don't lose hope. God is not finished with you. The pain has a purpose. The tears are watering seeds of greatness. And when the building begins, you'll rise with a strength and resilience that only comes from going through the breaking. Trust the process and know that God is crafting something extraordinary in you. When God prepares to elevate you, one of the most crucial changes happens in your mindset. Elevation starts in the mind before it manifests in your life. God knows that before he can trust you with new blessings, responsibilities, and opportunities, he has to transform the way you think. You can't step into a higher level with the same limited thinking that kept you stagnant in the past. That's why he begins by reshaping your thoughts, renewing your perspective, and challenging you to think differently. It's important to understand that your thoughts shape your reality. The Bible says, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. If you're constantly thinking small, doubting your potential, or replaying past failures, it will be difficult for you to embrace the greatness that God has placed within you. A renewed mind is essential for elevation because it allows you to see yourself as God sees you, capable, worthy, and chosen for a purpose. This transformation of the mind often requires unlearning old patterns of thinking. Maybe you grew up in an environment where negativity was the norm. Perhaps you were surrounded by people who spoke words of limitation over your life, telling you what you couldn't do or who you would never become. Those words may have taken root in your mind, creating mental strongholds that keep you from stepping into your full potential. But when God transforms you, He breaks down those strongholds and replaces them with His truth. Part of this mental renewal involves learning to see challenges differently. Elevation doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means you gain a new perspective on the difficulties you face. Instead of seeing obstacles as reasons to quit, you begin to see them as opportunities for growth. You understand that every setback is a setup for a comeback, and that God uses even the most painful experiences to prepare you for something greater. Renewing your mind also involves shifting from a scarcity mindset to a mindset of abundance. Too often people operate out of fear, thinking there's not enough success, love, or opportunity to go around. But when God transforms your mind, you begin to realize that He is a God of abundance. There is no shortage in His kingdom, and what He has for you is for you. You don't have to compete or compare yourself to others. You just need to walk in the path God has laid out for you. Another critical aspect of this mental transformation is learning to speak life over yourself and your circumstances. Words have power, and what you speak can shape what you experience. When God renews your mind, He teaches you to align your words with His promises. Instead of saying, "I can't," you start declaring, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." Instead of saying, "This will never change," you begin to declare, "God is working all things together for my good." The process of mental transformation also requires discipline. You have to be intentional about what you allow into your mind. Just as you wouldn't fill your body with toxic food, you shouldn't fill your mind with toxic thoughts, conversations, or media. Guard your mind, feed it with God's word, and surround yourself with people who uplift and challenge you to grow. One of the signs that your mind is being renewed is that your vision for your life begins to expand. You start dreaming bigger, setting higher goals, and believing that God can do exceedingly abundantly above all you can ask or think. Your perspective shifts from what's possible in the natural to what's possible through faith. The transformation of the mind is an ongoing process. Even when God elevates you, you'll need to continue renewing your mind to handle the new level. Each stage of growth requires a fresh perspective and deeper understanding. But the more you allow God to shape your thoughts, the more aligned you become with His purpose for your life. So if you sense that God is challenging the way you think, don't resist it. Embrace the process. Let Him renew your mind, strip away the doubts and fears, and fill you with His truth. Because when your mind is transformed, your life will follow. And that's when you'll be ready to step into the fullness of the elevation God has prepared for you. When God elevates you, it requires a separation from the familiar. This part of the process can be one of the most difficult because we naturally cling to what's comfortable. We are creatures of habit, and change often feels unsettling, even when it's for our good. But when God is moving you to a higher level, He will often call you away from the environments, relationships, and routines that are no longer aligned with your purpose. Separation doesn't always mean physical distance, although it can. Sometimes it means a shift in your priorities, attitudes, or even your identity. The friends who used to support you might not understand your new direction. The places that once felt right may no longer fit your spirit. This is because elevation requires you to step into a new dimension, and not everyone or everything can go with you. One of the clearest examples of this is found in the story of Abraham. God called him to leave his home, his family, and everything familiar to go to a land that God would show him. Abraham had to walk away from his comfort zone in order to step into his destiny. That's the essence of separation for elevation. Trusting God enough to leave what's known for what's yet to be revealed. Separation can be painful because it often involves letting go of people you love. It doesn't mean you stop caring for them, but it does mean that you recognize when certain relationships have served their season. Not everyone is meant to accompany you on your journey to greatness. Some people are only part of your life for a chapter, and holding on to them beyond their season can hinder your growth. Sometimes the separation is internal. God may call you to separate from old mindsets, toxic habits, or limiting beliefs. Elevation demands a transformation of the heart and mind. You can't carry old baggage into a new season. God wants to free you from anything that weighs you down so that you can soar to new heights. This process of separation also involves obedience. God may ask you to step away from a job, a business venture, or even a lifestyle that's no longer aligned with His plan for you. It may not make sense in the moment, and you may face criticism from others who don't understand your decision. But obedience is better than comfort, and God honors those who trust Him enough to follow His lead. One of the lessons in separation is learning to find your security in God rather than in people or circumstances. When you're willing to let go of what's familiar, you're demonstrating that your faith is in God's ability to provide, guide, and protect you. That kind of faith positions you for elevation because it shows that you trust God more than your own understanding. Separation also creates space for new connections and opportunities. When you release what no longer serves you, you make room for God to bring in the right people and resources for this new season. Don't be afraid of temporary loneliness. Sometimes isolation is necessary for God to do His deepest work in you. It's in those quiet moments of separation that you gain clarity, strength, and vision for the next step. This process isn't just about leaving behind what's holding you back. It's about stepping forward into what God has prepared for you. Elevation isn't just a reward, it's a responsibility. God isn't just moving you higher for your benefit. He's positioning you to make a greater impact. But to walk in that purpose, you must be willing to let go of anything that hinders your ability to fully embrace it. So if you find yourself in a season of separation, don't fight it. Don't cling to what God is asking you to release. Trust that He has a plan even if you can't see it yet. Trust that the discomfort of separation is temporary, but the blessing of elevation is eternal. God is preparing you for something greater, and sometimes that preparation requires letting go. Embrace the separation, knowing that it's a divine setup for your next level. Keep your eyes fixed on God, and He will guide you through the transition. What's ahead is better than what's behind. And when you reach that elevated place, you'll look back and realize that every separation was worth it because it positioned you exactly where God wanted you to be. When God elevates you, the transformation isn't just about outward success or visible blessings. It's about aligning your life with His divine timing. In the process of elevation, patience becomes your most essential companion. God doesn't rush. He is strategic, intentional, and precise in how and when He moves in your life. He knows the right moment to release the breakthrough, open the door, and reveal the next step. But before that happens, there's a waiting season designed to prepare you for what's coming. Patience is challenging because it goes against our natural desire for immediate results. We live in a world that prioritizes speed and instant gratification. But God operates on a different timetable, one that prioritizes preparation over speed. He isn't just interested in giving you what you want. He's invested in molding you into who you need to become. That molding process requires time, and time requires patience. During the waiting period, God is working behind the scenes in ways you can't see. Just because you don't see movement doesn't mean nothing is happening. The seed doesn't sprout the same day it's planted, but beneath the soil, roots are forming and strengthening. In the same way, God is strengthening your character, deepening your faith, and positioning you for the elevation that's coming. Patience during the process of elevation teaches you to trust God's timing rather than your own agenda. It's easy to grow frustrated when things aren't happening as quickly as you'd hoped. You may wonder if God has forgotten you or if He's withholding His blessings. But those moments of doubt are opportunities to lean into your faith. Waiting is a test of trust. Will you believe that God's timing is perfect even when your circumstances don't make sense? One of the lessons you learn during this season is that patience builds endurance. Elevation isn't just about reaching a destination. It's about being able to sustain what God entrusts to you. If you're elevated prematurely, you may not have the strength, wisdom, or resilience to handle the weight of your new responsibilities. Patience develops those qualities in you, ensuring that when the blessing comes, you're ready to steward it well. Patience also teaches gratitude and humility. When you've waited for something, you value it more deeply. You recognize that it wasn't your efforts alone that brought you success, it was God's grace and timing. This perspective keeps you grounded and prevents arrogance from taking root in your heart. You understand that elevation is a gift, not an entitlement. Another important aspect of patience is learning to stay faithful in the present while waiting for the future. God doesn't want you to be idle while you wait. He calls you to be diligent, obedient, and fruitful in the season you're in. There are lessons to learn, people to impact, and growth to experience right where you are. Sometimes your faithfulness in the current season is the very thing that positions you for the next level. Patience doesn't mean passivity, it means active trust. It means continuing to pray, work, and pursue excellence while surrendering the outcome to God. It means holding on to hope even when you face setbacks or delays. It means refusing to give up because you know that God's promise will come to pass at the appointed time. One of the most beautiful things about God's timing is that when the elevation finally comes, it happens suddenly. What took years of preparation can change in a moment. But that sudden breakthrough is the result of all the quiet, unseen moments of waiting and trusting. When the time is right, God will elevate you in a way that exceeds your expectations. So if you're in a waiting season, don't lose heart. Trust that God's timing is perfect, even if it doesn't align with your schedule. Remember that He's preparing you for something greater than you can imagine. Stay patient, stay faithful, and stay hopeful. Because when God moves, it will be worth every moment of waiting. And when you look back, you'll see that His timing was never delayed. It was divinely appointed. When God transforms you, the process of elevation is never random. It's intentional, purposeful, and divine. Every step, every challenge, every separation, and every delay is part of a masterful design to position you for greatness. Transformation requires faith, obedience, and an unwavering trust in God's timing. It demands that you release the old, embrace the uncomfortable, and develop the patience to wait for His perfect plan to unfold. God is not just elevating you for your benefit, but for His glory. The process refines you so that when you step into your new season, you carry the wisdom, strength, and humility to walk boldly in your calling. Trust the process, even when it's painful. Trust God, even when He's silent. Stay faithful, knowing that He is shaping you into someone who can handle the weight of elevation. When God transforms you, He makes no mistakes. What may seem like a setback is often a setup for something extraordinary. So keep moving forward with courage and confidence. Keep your eyes fixed on God, knowing that His plans for you are good. And when the transformation is complete, you won't just be elevated, you'll be equipped to lead, serve, and fulfill the purpose He has placed on your life. God's process is perfect, and His promise never fails. Stay the course and watch Him do the unimaginable in your life.